Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about a story that's all about incredible strategy and pure persistence, and a victory that literally sent shockwaves around the globe. So, let's get into it. How exactly did New Zealand become the very first self-governing nation to give all women the right to vote?
You know, at the very heart of this story isn't just a person, but an object. It was a symbol for an entire movement. The woman who made it all happen, Kate Sheppard, she actually called it a monster petition. And believe me, she had a really good reason. This thing was the physical proof, the evidence, of a demand that politicians just couldn't ignore anymore.
So, what made it a monster? Well, it all comes down to this number, almost 32,000 signatures. And just to put that into perspective for you, that was nearly a quarter of all the adult women in New Zealand at the time. I mean, think about that. This wasn't just some petition. It was basically a census of sheer determination. Okay, I want you to just imagine the scene in Parliament for a second. This petition, right, its pages are all glued together, and the whole thing is rolled up around a broom handle. It gets carried into the main chamber. And then a politician who was on their side, a guy named John Hall, starts to unroll it, right down the central aisle. And the scroll was so incredibly long that it just kept going and going until it hit the far wall with this big, loud thud. The message couldn't have been clearer. It was loud and it was absolutely undeniable. But look, a petition this massive doesn't just materialize out of thin air. You need a leader. And this movement, it had an absolutely brilliant one. So let's talk about the woman who orchestrated this entire campaign, Kate Sheppard. Now, Kate Sheppard wasn't just some passionate activist, although she was definitely that. She was a master strategist. See, for her, the vote wasn't the end goal. Not at all. It was the key. It was the tool that women needed to actually get things done, to get legal protections, to get better working conditions, to have a real say in shaping the society they lived in. And her strategy was just brilliant. It was so much more than just protests in the street. This was a full-on, multi-pronged campaign. I mean, she organized 3 massive petitions, and each one was bigger than the last, building up this incredible momentum. She wrote these super persuasive pamphlets. She held public meetings all over the country to get the word out. And, this is so important, she built alliances with politicians who were sympathetic. Plus, she made sure the movement was inclusive, bringing both Maori and Pākehā women into the fold. This made it a truly national effort. And here is a perfect example of her method in action. This wasn't about shouting. She didn't just rely on emotion. Instead, she built these really logical, clear, and convincing arguments that tackled every single objection head-on. She was, essentially laying out this undeniable case for equality, one reason at a time.
So, all this careful, methodical work, it all led to this one dramatic final showdown in 1893. The bill to give women the vote, it actually passed the lower house pretty easily. But now it was facing its biggest test. It had to get through the much more conservative upper house, the Legislative Council.
And this is where the story gets a little wild. The most powerful politician in the country, the premier, a guy named Richard Seddon, was personally trying to kill the bill. He was dead set against it. But his super aggressive lobbying, it completely backfired. Apparently, he angered 2 of the council members so badly that they changed their votes and decided to vote for the bill, basically just to spite him. You can't make this stuff up.
Just look at that. 20 to 18. That is how close this was. We're talking about a margin of just 2 votes. If one of those guys who switched hadn't, it would have been a tie, and the bill would have failed. Decades of work, that monster petition with 32,000 names, it all came down to this single, razor-thin vote. And with that single vote, just like that, history was made. On September 19, 1893, New Zealand became the first self-governing nation in the entire world where all women had the right to vote. The governor, who actually wasn't a big fan of the idea himself, signed it into law. It was this massive victory, not just for the women of New Zealand, but really for the idea of a better, more inclusive democracy everywhere. So remember that thud we talked about? The sound of the petition hitting the wall of Parliament? Well, that thud was about to be heard all around the world. Let's take a look at the immediate and long-term impact of this incredible decision. Okay, so for years, the opposition's main argument was that women didn't even want the vote, or that they wouldn't know what to do with it if they got it. Well, this right here just demolishes that argument. In the very first election, held just a couple of months later, 65% of eligible women showed up and voted. 65%! That is a huge turnout, and it proved all their critics were completely and utterly wrong. And New Zealand's success didn't just stay in New Zealand. It became this incredibly powerful example for the rest of the world. It was proof that, guess what? Society doesn't fall apart when women vote. All of a sudden, suffragists in Australia, in the US, in Britain, they could all point to New Zealand and say, see, it can be done. Look at them. It was like a catalyst that really helped speed up the fight for the vote everywhere.
So when you boil it all down, what's the real lesson here? I mean, beyond just being a historical first, what can we actually learn from how Kate Sheppard and her allies pulled off this amazing victory?
Well, this is pretty much the blueprint for how to create change. Sheppard's victory was about meticulous organization, not just loud confrontation. It was about building broad coalitions, finding common ground. And that monster petition, it wasn't just a list of names. It was undeniable evidence. It was like a performance of democracy in itself, saying, hey, look, we are already a part of this. All you have to do is make it official.
So what's the legacy today? Does it still matter? Absolutely. In 2023, a majority, 51%, of the members of parliament in New Zealand were women. Think about that. The country has had several female prime ministers. This is the direct, living legacy of the world that those 32,000 women started building way back in 1893.
It's a really powerful thought to end on, isn't it? A movement built on paper, on persuasion, and just sheer persistence, completely reshaped a nation and inspired the entire world. So it kind of makes you wonder, right? What are the monster petitions that are needed today? What are the unstoppable arguments of our time just waiting for their own moment to roll down the aisle and hit the far wall with a thud?